Welcome back. It's August, which means that most of us have just come back from holiday and we are already wondering when the next one is. This month on Damn Parenting, we have our regular guest back, but we are also heading into school season. So, over the coming weeks, we have episodes coming out that are going to meet you wherever you are on that journey. Maybe you have the 3-year-old, or they're starting school for the first time, or maybe they're going to be going back after their summer break. We have you covered with the insight and support you actually need right now. But first, this is Damn Sex with Debby Poort. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. See you on the other side. It's August. Welcome back to Damn Parenting. I'm your host, Eva, and I'm so glad you're back here with me. I want to start with something that I think we all know, but somehow manage to forget completely the moment we become parents. And that thing is, well, you got here because of sex. Like literally, the baby. The whole reason you're listening to a parenting podcast right now, sex did it. And at some point, you and your person, your partner, your co-parent, whoever made this happen with you, something happened. And well, here we all are. And then the baby arrived and sex just kind of left that building. Not permanently, not forever, but quietly and often without anyone quite noticing until it had been really long time. And someone does the maths and neither of you wants to say that number out loud. Today, I'm back with Debby Poort, sex and intimacy counselor and couples therapist, and our damn sex therapist. And today we're going to be talking about desire, where it goes, what it actually does for you when it is present. And I mean, for you, not for your relationship, not as a favor to your partner, but what the science says it does for your body and your brain and your sleep and your stress, the individual case for it. We're also getting into responsive desire, the idea that for a lot of people, especially parents, wanting does not come before willingness. It comes after, which sounds very counterintuitive until Debby will explain it to us. And then I'm sure it's going to make sense. And we'll also be talking about the couples who both quietly stopped reaching for each other. There was no fight about it. There wasn't a big moment. It just kind of soft stopping, because that deserves a conversation too. This is the Damn Sex series, and we are starting, as we should, at the very beginning, which, as we have established, is sex. So let's get into it. A quick note before we start, Damn Parenting is not funded. It is not produced in a fancy studio, and I am not a therapist or a researcher. I am a parent just asking questions I probably have alone and finding the people who can answer them properly. If that's the kind of show you want to keep existing, you can follow me over on Instagram or you can hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That costs nothing and it genuinely makes a difference. Right. Debby, welcome back to Damn Parenting.
Hi, thanks again for having me.
Okay, so we really need to start with the science, I guess, because I think that's going to reframe this whole conversation. So can you tell us, what does the research actually show about what sex does for us? And I mean that as us as individuals, not just as our couple relationship, and not about satisfaction, but actually let's talk about mental health, physical health, the whole picture.
Yeah, exactly. Because sex is good for us in so many different ways, physically, emotionally, and relationally. So if we're talking about physically, there are lots of benefits. Some examples are cardiovascular advantages because it's considered light to moderate exercise and it's good for blood flow and circulation. Another really important benefit is how it improves sleep and reduces anxiety and stress. It reduces stress hormones such as cortisol. And it also releases all sorts of nice chemicals that can improve your mood, such as dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. And endorphins specifically can also help reduce chronic pain or even menstrual cramps. And there's some research to support that it helps with certain types of headaches. And then if we look at relationally, there's a lot of research out there that indicates that there's a strong connection between sexual satisfaction and overall relationship satisfaction. So how you relate to your partner often goes much smoother when you guys are intimate and close in a sexual, but also just in a regular, cuddly, nice, general, intimate way.
So when we're talking about sex being good for you, we are generally talking about measurable effects, I guess, with sleep and cortisol. It's not just a feeling.
Exactly. It's good for our bodies.
How do you share that with someone, not speaking on behalf of myself here, but a depleted mom, especially a new mom, or just someone who probably has been running on empty for a really long time in a way that just, it doesn't land immediately as pressure? Because, the sex is good for you, and I'm putting this in quotations, I guess. It can sound quite a lot like you should be having more sex, which is obviously the last thing that a person really needs to hear
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to add pressure to an already pressurized situation. So, what I'm really doing is I'm looking to help a new mother feel supported and connected to themselves, but also their partner, and not to feel pressure to have sex when you feel depleted. It is good for you, but actually, for a new mom, sleep is probably more important than sex. So, we want to be really wary of like the negative impact of that pressure and what it tells a woman that it becomes a should. It's more a general understanding that it's something that can benefit you. And maybe later on, maybe when you're getting better sleep, and maybe when your partner is fully supporting you. So, my job is to help both partners understand that there's also many different forms of sex so that you don't shy away from including like touch and other types of stimulation. And this also helps women feel less pressure to have intercourse. For example, like what we talked about last time when there's pain. So, we want to encourage people to be intimate and to engage in sexual activity that they're interested in. So, it doesn't have to involve penetration. It could be things like mutual masturbation, oral or manual stimulation. But I also encourage people not to forget the importance and benefit of sensual touch, such as massage, cuddling, kissing, those types of things. It's important to understand that you can receive the benefits of sex just through intimate touch without having intercourse. Oxytocin, for example, isn't just released during intercourse, it's also released through physical touch, like cuddling and caressing. So being close and intimate during this season is what's important, not any one specific act.
Is it also about who says this? Like, does it land differently coming from a therapist than it would do from a partner?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think coming from a therapist, it feels less pressurized. It feels more like information gathering and kind of validation where you're at. And a partner is seeing it from a very specific lens. They're not getting their needs met. So there can be frustration and resentment, whereas a therapist just comes at it in a very neutral, supportive, caring way.
And I want to talk about the responsive desire. That desire for a lot of people does not really come first. It actually comes in response to something. Can you explain how is that different from, as it's known as, duty sex? Because from the
Yeah.
outside, that looks kind of very similar.
Yeah. So I also want to differentiate between like the willingness and the responsiveness. So willingness to engage in some form of sexual contact is always the first step towards wanting sex for people with responsive desire. So if you aren't thinking about sex spontaneously, then being willing to be put in a sexy situation is where I'll help you focus first. So this isn't out of duty or obligation, but more out of the value of sex and the relationship for the positive benefits, but also kind of the closeness that you might seek with your partner. So it's about being willing to be close to your partner to see if desire gets sparked. So if you show up for intimacy with your partner, even if you aren't turned on yet, but you feel willing to be close to them, desire often builds through touch and direct sexual stimulation. So people often feel like if they aren't in the mood, they shouldn't engage in sex. But if you're someone with responsive and not spontaneous desire, you could be waiting for a really long time to ever have sex again. So being willing means that the conditions are right, you feel emotionally and physically supported by your partner, and the situations that inhibit you sexually have already been resolved.
Can I just ask on a counterpoint of that? Is there actually a risk of responsive desire getting used as a reason to pressure someone? Like, just start it and you'll get into it, which is obviously not the point of this at all.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we work on that because that's a fear that I think a lot of women have. Like, well, am I going to be pressured now if I admit that I have responsive desire? But in my experience, once it's explained that in order for someone to be willing, right, that there's certain conditions that need to happen first. So willingness is where we focus, not actually the responsiveness. So willingness means like your partner's giving you your needs, like providing things that you need in order to be willing.
This might be the question I most want to sit with, I guess, is how do you help someone reconnect to their own desire when it's actually been quiet for so long? Not just like low, but genuinely absent. Like part of them has just gone offline because matricins really can have a major effect on a woman. Patricins can equally have an effect on a man. So where do you even start?
Yeah, this is a really great and important question. And I always start with working on their sexual breaks or inhibitors. So sexual breaks are the environmental, emotional, and physical factors that inhibit your willingness for sex. So, for example, environmental factors include things like dishes in the sink, the possibility of being interrupted by a child, or even something as simple as having scratchy sheets on the bed. And some of the emotional factors are things like stress, anxiety, or feeling resentment towards your partner. And then we have the physical factors, which include things like illnesses, lack of sleep, or even pain during intercourse. So all of these factors, all of these breaks need to be addressed before we work on helping the person be willing to engage sexually again. So it's not a question of just telling someone, be willing. No, we really have to uncover what is making someone unwilling.
How long does this typically take? Because I think many people might worry that if it's been quiet for 6 months, a year, even 2 years or 3 years, it might just be gone.
Yeah, that's a really big question and a concern that people have. And we always build a program that works for the individual couple. So where they're at, are they cuddling at all? Are they touching at all? Or have they lost all forms of intimate touch? So the duration is really going to vary depending on where you are on that spectrum. But typically people are still having some form of touch. So we build on that. So we turn kind of non-sexy but intimate touch into sexy touch. And we do that in a progressive way that feels comfortable for the couple. So the time really varies depending on where you're at.
Also, is it about the body first? Before, it's always about relationships or the partners, but is it just reconnecting to the fact that you have a body that belongs to you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that we work on the kind of the breaks and the emotional stuff and the physical circumstances, but then we also want to help people get back into their bodies. So it is a question of becoming more mindful of the body. And there's exercises that I often recommend that involve mindfulness and mindful touch and becoming more embodied. So yeah, it's definitely about the individual becoming more embodied and then becoming more embodied with your partner.
The next thing is you said about sexy touch. I find that quite, I don't know, cute, awkward. I don't know. It's a mix of all these feelings. But is there a minimum, like of touch, of closeness, of non-sexual intimacy, something that couples should be maintaining? And I hate using should, but could be maintaining even when sex is generally not on the table, because I do think a lot of couples, especially in the early years, let everything go at once. You know, the sex, yes, but also even holding hands or the long hugs, the kisses, the physical ease with each other. And then they look up and realize, oh, this is when we talk about having roommates.
Exactly. That is exactly what happens, right? And let's talk about that. There's a reason why people avoid non-sexual touch, like even cuddling or hand holding. And that is often because they're afraid to have the idea that they have to take things further. So if I'm cuddling with you or I'm holding your hand or I'm kissing you, will I have to take this further? So I don't think there's necessarily a minimum of touch, but I do think that we underestimate the value of non-sexual touch, like cuddling or hand holding. So if you're avoiding cuddling for the reason I just spoke of, that you're afraid that it has to lead somewhere, I always help couples have these conversations to speak directly about what type of touch you're willing to have, be able to indicate that in the moment, to be able to say, hey, I'm willing to hang out with you on the couch and have a cuddle, but tonight I don't feel like having sex. So helping people express their limits and boundaries, and so that they feel more free to start touching non-sexually and even sexually, but with a limit. So maybe I want to kiss you tonight, but I don't want anything further. So that's usually where we begin to help people who aren't quite willing yet to have sex, but they are willing to reestablish some intimate touch.
I can only imagine, because it can feel very surprisingly awkward to start suddenly holding your hands or wanting to kiss with someone you live with after so long. I think wrapping things up, I know these are super short, but that's part of sex as well. Sometimes it can just be a quickie. So I guess this is one that I think a lot of people will recognize, even if they've never said it out loud. But what do you say to the couple where both of them have stopped initiating, and it's not because they're angry and it's not because of conflict, but it's just because somewhere along the way they've just both stopped, life has taken over. And neither of them is actually reaching for the other one. So there's no drama. It's just a sad, quiet resignation.
Well, I don't think it's a resignation. I think there's reasons why people do that. And often it is work and children and all the responsibilities. But I also think that there's something happening in their dynamic and their cycle where they're getting stuck, where the initiation didn't feel safe anymore. So yeah, then it just became this, I'll give up. It's a quiet resignation. So I need to help the client understand their cycle, help them map it out. Where did this problem begin? What's going on with initiation? And then work towards helping them initiate in a way that ensures they won't be dismissed or rejected. So allowing a partner to say no in a way that's supportive and not rejecting. And this often encourages that natural initiator, because usually there is a natural initiator in the relationship. So we need to help that person feel safe enough again to start initiating in whatever form that may be. That may be, let's hold hands.
Another question coming in here to me, but is the absence of a conflict actually the problem? Like, does the lack of a friction make it harder to address because there's actually nothing to point to?
Oh, sometimes people can't distinguish where it went wrong. Like, we're not having conflict. We get along. We're best friends, but we've lost this spark. Right. So then we really have to kind of look at, okay, what created that spark in the beginning? What are the things that are needed to create that spark again? And what are, offering tools that kind of reignite. So things that they can do proactively to start being more intimate again, to start holding hands, to start cuddling, to start then moving that towards more intimate sexual touch. But yeah, sometimes people come in and they're like, we're clueless. Sex just stopped and we don't have a real reason for it. But there always is a reason, right? So if we dig a little bit deep enough, usually we find what that reason is for sure.
I was gonna ask, so you're not like my therapist who's like, hey, can you sit down and map this out, like how you got to this feeling? Because I'm thinking, like, I can't remember. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, brain fog, exhaustion, all the rest of it. Just we can't do that. So you're not asking us to do that.
No, we're going to sit there and say, okay, so that's not what you think it is. You don't remember, it's brain fog. Okay, let's start with the brain fog. What do you need to be less foggy? What do you need now? What are the emotions that are alive in the room right now? And so we don't necessarily need to pinpoint a moment, but it's more a general feeling of what's happening in the relationship right now. And was there an origin of that? A circumstance that maybe needs to be repaired or understood. But most importantly, what do you need right now in the moment to start to feel more connected to your partner?
Well, Debbie, before I'm going to let you go, can you tell us where can people find you? And I also know that you have something free that people can actually access right now. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so if people go to my second website, which is sexandintimacycounseling.nl, I offer a free welcome course. This is designed for couples who have decided or are deciding they want to come see me. It's kind of like a pre-intake where you get to learn a few of the concepts that I teach during therapy session, but it also prepares you if you are considering coming in, you kind of know what to expect a little bit. And this is accessible for everybody. It's free. You don't have to come see me. You can still take the course and you can probably learn a few things along the way.
Well, Debbie, thank you again for joining us here on our Damn Sex series.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So that's willingness and desire, two different things, and both of them worth understanding. And what I'm thinking about in this conversation, what Debbie has offered, is that we tend to think of sex as something we do for the relationship or for our partner, or also because it's just been a while and we feel we should. There's our word again. And what the research is actually saying is there is a version of this that is entirely for you and for your nervous system and for your sleep and for your sense of self as a person who is alive in a body that does belong to you. And that is a different conversation, and I think that is a more honest one. We're building on all these episodes. We started back in May where Debbie was just introducing us just to the topic of sex. I mean, this is an awkward conversation. Many of us probably won't even have these with our friends, but each of these episodes will add on to the next. And if any of them spark anything in you that you probably want to think more about or talk about with your partner, I hope these will give you somewhere to start. And as always, if this is useful, do share it. That is this whole ecosystem, and that is how this show reaches the people who need it. I'll be back next week. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.